Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about the big celebration of the United States turning 250 years old. So with that, I'm going to be looking at the United States chart that I always use, which is the chart of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which occurred, of course, July 4th, 1776. And the chart I've used for years. It is extremely accurate. We call it the Kelleher chart because Vedic astrologer James Kelleher is the one that rectified the time. We know the day. So I'm going to be using this chart, and I'm going to be looking at where the transits are on this July 4th, the 250-year anniversary for the United States. And I thought I could also glance at a solar return chart. What is so interesting about the solar return chart and looking at the chart for July 4th, 1776, on that day, 2006, is what you will see is the sun has actually shifted backwards in the zodiac because of precession. Because if you look at that day, the sun should be from year to year the same degree. At least it is when we look at our own solar return charts. But because the United States is 250 years old, the sun has shifted. Remember the zodiac, because the precession shifts backwards 1 degree in the zodiac every 72 years. And we have the sun at 22 degrees on the birthday, 1776, but it's actually shifted back to 18 degrees. Anyway, I find that interesting, but I know what you're here for. You want to know what's going to be happening to the United States, and I'm here to give it to you. So we are going to be studying some charts because this is really predictive for what's to come for the United States here by analyzing the birth chart and where the planets have moved to. So with that, before I get going, I want to remind everyone about my new app. My new app is out on the App Store. It is Galactic Planner. And I know we've had another app prior to this, but it was never on the App Store. It wasn't a real app. But this is totally revamped and different. This has the capability for you to put in your birth chart and to ask any question you need to know about your birth chart. Anything, okay? You want to know about love, if you want to know about money, if you want to know about career, if you want to know who you are, this is the app. This is the most advanced astrological app out there right now that uses only an astrologer's information. Everything in this app is being pulled from my books. I have over 16 books now, and all of my university teachings. So this is the app that you will get the information you need about your chart. Go to the App Store, Galactic Planner, that's the name. And don't forget, you can find all this information on my website. Go to galacticcenter.org or go directly to the App Store and put in Galactic Planner. All right, let's get going and talk about what we can expect for the United States. On this day that the celebration is going on in Washington, D.C., I have been told that they're having a lot of fighters do for entertainment, fighting. I personally don't think that's what we should be doing, but hey, this is what's going to be happening. Personally, I think it should be something more optimistic than fighting, but that's my opinion. All right, so putting up the charts for the United States, let me scoot over so we can see them a bit better. For the United States, 1776, July 4th, as well as the transits for that day. And as I was mentioning, notice the sun has moved from where it was in 1776, from 22 degrees of Gemini to 18. So that's because of the precession of the equinoxes. But what's so interesting about this is that Mercury, transiting Mercury, will be in the 8th house with Jupiter of this chart. So transiting Mercury, transiting Jupiter. The 8th house is all about major money, the big money, where they print money. So this means that there is something evolving that will make the United States wealthier. This has to be in any individual's chart. When I see transiting Jupiter in the 8th house, money comes. So this is extremely productive for the United States. And not only that, Jupiter is exalted. And it's even almost on its exact degree of exaltations. It's 5 degrees of Cancer. Jupiter on this day is 6 degrees. So another good thing is that Jupiter is going to be conjunct Rahu in the 8th house, transiting Jupiter on natal Rahu. This is astounding for great wealth and expansion for the United States. Furthermore, it's also going to uncover a lot of corruption and things behind the scenes that normally have never come out. I think these are all the files about Kennedy, about aliens, and about finances, where the money's been spent and gone. All these things are coming out. And probably even things that, I don't know if they were held within the government, but about the Epstein files, because what I see is the exposure of anything corrupt with transiting Jupiter in the 8th house, but especially Mercury just turned retrograde a few days prior to this, and Mercury deals with review, reassessing things, and digging deeper in the 8th house. And Mercury sits there at 2 degrees, and notice that this is a Mercury return. Mercury will return once a year, but on the birthday, it's right there. So this digs deeper. Mercury, transiting Mercury is on natal Mercury, saying we can see deeper and review and reassess things profoundly with what's going on in the United States. This is amazing. But I have to warn everyone. As I said, something is not going to go as planned on this day, because Uranus conjuncts Mars on this day, exactly in Taurus, in the sky. They're coming together. And they're at 9 degrees, so they are actually in a square to the natal moon in the United States chart. And furthermore, the moon represents the public. The moon represents the emotions. It's really the heartbeat of a chart. So when I look at that moon being in the natal chart for the United States at 7 degrees of Aquarius, we have Rahu at 6 degrees of Aquarius in the sky. This is affecting the emotions that people profoundly at this time. This whole month, pretty much. It's astounding, really, what I'm seeing here. So The moon in the United States chart sits in the 3rd house, which deals specifically with the communications that is being processed and given to the people. It deals with media, computers, everything, how we connect to people. But the other thing is the 3rd house rules is travel. And this could disrupt traveling plans. And with Mercury retrograde, it's even worse with travel and maybe people trying to get to this event or have it happen, but something's up that's unexpected. And here's the other thing. With this Uranus on Mars in the sky, Uranus rules technology, but it also rules airplanes and travel. And if they have any aerial shows or things with things flying in the sky, things of that nature, there could be some major disruptions and problems. And around this time, I said, look out, there's going to be some issues around airplanes and travel. There could be a mishap. Another thing, well, what we have coming up soon. So looking at the United States chart and considering when K2 will go into Cancer, which will be in November, and of course Rahu will go into Capricorn. But this means K2's in the 8th house of the United States, digging up all of the dirt and corruption. That's what the 8th house is. But it's also big money. And it's also anything to do with government affairs, dealing with money, corruption. This is it. So K2 will get to the bottom of things. But what's interesting, in November, when K2 first enters into Cancer, Mars will be there. And Mars will really make things very difficult. And the 8th house does deal with endings and deaths. So it can be the ending or the death of something in November. And then Mars will go retrograde, and it will predominantly be in Leo. And this will be, Mars will be retrograde for about 6 months. And by the end of March and most of April of 2027, Mars and K2 will come together again in Cancer. So we've got a lot that's about to transpire. But getting over that, then I want to look at where Mars is in the United States chart during this time. Conjunct Uranus, it will be in the 6th house. And the 6th house can deal with accidents. It can deal with difficulties and enemies. So be aware that this day, as I keep alluding to, may not go as planned. And especially with Rahu on the moon. Saturn on this day sits at 20 degrees of Pisces, so it is actually in a square to the sun, meaning that this is another indication of some difficulties and setbacks. Venus on this day sits at 0 degrees of Leo. So it's just gone into the sign of Leo, and that shifts the energy a lot. It will be in the 9th house of the United States chart, which is actually a positive. But Venus is starting to align with K2, which can represent some difficulties, again, with things with aerial stuff. Aerial stuff, Venus can sometimes rule that as well, aircraft. But Saturn is actually opposing Saturn in this chart, which can mean difficulties within the government. So that has a lot to do, I think, with possibly what happens with the midterms in November, and or there can be a major problem for something big happening to world leaders. In other words, the president and what's going on in his family. Because here's another technique I'm going to pull up. And this is a solar return chart for the United States. So looking at the solar return chart, this is when the sun will come back to the exact degree and minute that it was at the time of birth. This is a technique that we do all the time for people. It is actually, I think, a Western technique. So a solar return happens every year on your birthday. And what it is it's a transit chart of where all the planets are on the day of your birthday when the sun comes back to the same position it was at birth. So looking at this, I pulled up the solar return chart, and I found it very interesting that Venus exactly aligned with Ketu in this chart. And that in this chart, looking at the ascendant is in Capricorn. So this Venus Ketu in this chart is in the 8th house. And Venus with Capricorn ascendant rules the 10th house of the government, the leaders, and it goes to the 8th house of challenges, difficulties. The 8th house is known to be the house of death, so the death of something or someone, with Venus being with Ketu, the indicator of losses. Now, I have seen these solar return charts to be, here's what I have to say. A solar return chart you cannot read in and of itself by itself. It has to be predicted in the transit chart. So this is not necessarily as obvious in the transit chart as it is in the solar return chart. So I just get a lot of corruption being exposed. I get a lot of money coming out and prosperity for the US. I do get that something could happen with aerial things or with airplanes around this time. And I get the public, the masses, they're upset about something because Rahu's on the moon, and Rahu can be major upsets. And it also means definitely that there's been a lot of hype and a lot of lies been put out there, because Rahu is not necessarily, it deals with addictions and extremes and it's on the moon, but most of all, when I look at where Mars and Ketu will go by November, this is a problem. Something intense and extreme will happen by November, because Mars will cross over Mercury in the 8th house, and it will hit Rahu in the 8th house, and it will come together by mid-November and December. Mars with Ketu in the 8th house of the United States chart. So look, talking about this, we have a lot on our plate to look at astrologically and as astrologers, what's coming up. We have to be careful as to what we put out there in terms of not putting people in fear, because there's nothing worse than fear. And here's another thing. Things can be altered. We have free will. And as a collective, we've got to work towards making things better in this world instead of making things worse. Finding peace within ourselves and finding a way to transmute this energy that is indicative of this chart for the United States. And I think everyone agrees with me. We all want the United States to prosper, to grow. It's our homeland. And those of you that aren't from the United States, everyone wants everyone to prosper. And I feel like if the United States does prosper, it can help other countries as well. So that is where I'm going to leave this. This is a heavy time. Rahu and Ketu going through the 2nd and the 8th house of the United States chart. It's all about money and finances. And if I could say anything really positive, that's going to be on an upswing. Yes, there's going to be ups and downs with it, but overall, it's going to be fine. The United States is going to really prosper financially and find ways to be more successful and more productive and more successful. So with that, I think I'll close. Remember, if you would like more information on me, about any of the things I have going on, go to my website, galacticcenter.org. Thank you.